I've always loved film. I've always enjoyed the movie-going experience. And I suppose in the late 60s, early 70s, courtesy of film societies in Liverpool, I was exposed to underground movies. You know, Chelsea Girls and Flesh and I mean, I guess there was a lot of Warhol, but there was, I guess, Kenneth Anger movies and so on. Pictures which now fallen from grace, I suppose, but actually the Kenneth Anger pictures I still think have got a strange power to them. And I thought, well, these are guys who picked up cameras and didn't have any money and just made images, put images on film with modest, you know, creative skills in some cases. In the case of a movie like Empire, none. You know, they just filmed the Empire State Building for 24 hours. I thought, well, I guess I was 17 or 18. I thought, this is something I want to do. Maybe not what I want to do with my life, but this is. I have an 8mm camera. I can do this. And by that time, I had a group of friends at school and later at university who were equally interested in the process. Some of them I still know. Pete Atkins, who wrote the second and third Hellraiser movies. Doug Bradley, who's Pinhead in those movies. Bunch of really good people who shared my passion for this. And even though there wasn't anybody in our peer group or amongst our educators who were really willing or able to give us some sense of direction, we felt, well, we can probably do this without any sense of direction. I think that almost all the things I've done without reference to a set of rules, in part because I haven't known what the rules were. When I stepped onto the set of the first Hellraiser movie, I hadn't directed a movie with a 35mm camera, so I didn't really know what the rules were. I didn't know who the sound guy was, and I guess I knew what the camera operator was because he was behind the camera, but that was about it. I don't think that finally hurt the movie. It may actually have been useful because I was sort of making it up as I went along.
We thought, rightly or wrongly, and I suppose everybody always does, that we were doing significant, important work. To some extent we were. To some extent we were the usually snotty, conceited, we are the center of the universe sort of group. But it was a very exciting, exhilarating, liberating time. Yeah, and now, you know, I mean, I live and work in Hollywood and I make my living in the film industry and as a novelist. Nevertheless, you know, I look back on those movies we made completely for ourselves, fueled only by our own artistic pretensions, if you like. I look back very nostalgic. I suppose everybody does, though, to work they did when they caught the bug most. And a lot of what we discovered then is certainly being used now, both informationally and subconsciously, in terms of how we do things and the things we choose to do. Were fueled and fired by what we were doing back then, I think.
Nobody saw the movies. I'm not sure in the sense we even knew what the audience was, or even if there was an audience. And I guess I was 19 when we did Salome. I don't think it was really even that important that there was an audience. I think what was important was that I was working with other people who encouraged me by working with me, by simply being there and putting their own hard labor on the line, encouraged me to believe that these things were worthwhile. In a cultural environment where there was precious little else. I mean, Liverpool in the 60s, early 70s, was not a place where there was a lot of avant-garde filmmaking going on. And what there was going on tended to be of a very socially directed kind. And my material, whether it's been on the page or on the screen or the canvas, has always been fantastical in some way or other. It's always been what I've wanted to do.
We did a stage production of Oscar Wilde's play of Salome, in which I played John the Baptist blind. First attempt at special effects makeup by Clive, which was basically paper mache. He just got good old stiff toilet paper and paper mache'd completely over my eyes and then painted it. And I had a rope tied around my middle, carefully tied to the back of the stage and measured out so that I wouldn't wander into the front row of the audience. Clive then wanted to turn this into a film, which we shot largely in the cellar of Dorothy Naylor's florist on Smithdown Road in Liverpool. And we would go down there in the evenings when the shop was closed or at the weekends, and we'd move all the vases of flowers out of this rather damp, cold cellar, move all of those out, and then we'd go in with one light and an 8mm camera and an attempt to tell the story of Salome, which I graduated to playing King Herod from John the Baptist.
The sets were sheets of wallpaper turned backwards with designs painted on them, very chiaroscuro lighting to disguise the fact that there was no depth in the room. And it was that sort of that make-do but be inventive approach that we'd used in theatre, we also did in film.
A Salome story is boy, there's layers to that story, aren't there? I mean, it's a very sexual story. It's a very ritualistic story. It's a bargain story. The story had always attracted me. The Bible is a source of inspiration constantly for me, and remains a significant source of inspiration. But the references to Salome in the Bible are, I think, slight, but nevertheless, biblical stories have a kind of, if they're good stories, have a kind of primal quality to them. The Forbidden came out of the Faust story. It was an attempt to, I suppose, re-envisage the Faust myth in ways which are very particular to my imagination. I remember trying to get some backing for this, and I think we sent the script to one of the agencies that was then putting money into you know, modestly or low budget. I mean, we're looking at $2,000 or $3,000 or £3,000 to complete this picture. And I said, well, at the end of it, the angels come in and they skin the Faust character, and it's a sublime and wonderful moment of unveiling. And I remember the letter coming back from these people, I wish I still had it, saying, what is sublime and wonderful about being skinned?
I was that flayed man. People have seen that footage and have expressed disgust and horror at how realistic it was, which again is a great tribute to pocket money cinema, because basically it was a paint job. I lay down and Clive and everybody else put successive layers of wet paint on me, which we allowed to dry, and the peeling flesh that you see coming back is simply layers of paint. Beneath each layer of paint there would be a new design painted on to represent layers of flesh, muscle, bone, or whatever. It's surprisingly successful. You know, I'd like to show you the scars, but it was all fake, and it was painted. We had to, nobody told us these techniques. We didn't know about these things. We had to invent ways to do this, because we knew people had done it before us. You know, we'd read the books about Cocteau inventing techniques on set. You know, well, if you run the film backward, can we do this? One of the other things we were doing in The Forbidden was trying to give it a heightened reality, a super reality, by printing the movie in negative and painting the figures and the sets in such a way that when shown in negative they would look almost like an animated positive. And there's some very interesting results from that, in which you do, it looks like a kind of drug reality or super reality.
I was constantly trying to find, successfully or not, as the case may be, ways to make the things new for me. I mean, you start with something, you start with an obsession of some kind or other, in this case, finding a fresh way to tell a Faust tale. And then you have to make it very private, right? You have to make it very intimate. It has to make a new kind of sense to you. The whole thing about making these narratives belong to you is to, in a sense, encode them. And in The Forbidden, what you have is almost a literal code of signs, hieroglyphics, images, which were literally occult as far as the potential viewer was concerned, because the only person who knew what they meant, and now I've forgotten, was me. There's always a tension between, in any narrative, between the level of encoded material that is very personal and very private. In The Forbidden, I think we pushed to the limits of the encoded material. I'm very attracted to images which tease us with possibilities of interpretation, but make us work for them.
One image I remember very strongly from The Forbidden was that Clive had built what he called his nail board, which was basically a block of wood which he'd squared off, and then he'd banged 6-inch nails in at the intersections of the squares, and spent endless hours playing with what happened if a light was swung around in front of it to see the way that the shadows of the nails moved, and what happened if it was toplit, and so forth. So of course, when I saw the first illustrations for this gentleman, it rang a bell with me that here was actually Clive putting the ideas that he'd been playing around with the nail board in The Forbidden. Now, 10, 15 years later, or whatever, here he'd actually put the image all over a human being's face, which is typical of the way that he will work with ideas. You'll find little bits of ideas that he would play around with that 10, 15 years later, when apparently it's all forgotten with, that idea is suddenly brought up again and dealt with in a much bigger way.
Imagistically, there are definite echoes of The Forbidden in Hellraiser. And I think also thematically, people who've come to appreciate and enjoy Clive's work, particularly since he broke surface, so to speak, you know, I think if they took the time to look back, they would see a through line. I think the concerns of the early plays and the concerns and images and thematic concerns of The Forbidden are directly connected to what he's doing now.
Towards the end of the movie, we brought to life some Vesalius etchings, which were, you know, he was a surgeon and anatomist, and he either personally did or had done for him a series of very elegant classical etchings of men and women standing around leaning on pillars with their skins off. I mean, it was a very cool image. And we tried to reproduce that in negative in somebody's front room, probably living room, by painting the place black and meticulously cross-hatching the whole image in white, and then printing the thing in negative. Those are the kind of things. I still look back on those things and feel as though the lesson was that you just do what's in your head, and you trust what's in your head. These are by no means sophisticated movies, but when I showed them to people later, they did things to people. And what does an artist want to do? I think an artist wants to do things to other people. It's a sort of form of magic. You want to be able to influence people remotely. And the magician passes a spell along. The magician, you know, works up a potion or puts, you know, needles in dolls. The artist says, I'm going to influence you with words, I'm going to influence you with images. I may never touch you, I may never speak to you, but remotely I have influenced you, I have power over you. My imagination has power over your mind. the force of the imagination behind these things is finally more important, I believe, than knowing the rules, because somebody else will help you with the rules. You know, that's what technicians are there for, to say, no, you can't possibly do that, it'll be out of focus. And that's fine, you learn as you go along, but I think coming into it just passionate about putting stories down, whether it be putting them on a piece of film or putting them on a piece of paper, passionate about, or indeed on a stage or on a canvas, communicating something which is in you as forcibly as possible and not apologizing for it, not being, not coming to the process with a series of rules already in your head because you went to film school, for instance. I mean, I now as a producer see dozens and dozens of films a month from you know, little films from people who've been to film school and so on, and there's a kind of deadness about a lot of them. There's a sense that they've got all the technological stuff right, and it's all very smooth, it's all very slick, but where is the imaginative, you know, passion? Where's the heat?